Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me as always is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. In this week's episode, we review AEW's programming ahead of their much-anticipated WrestleDream pay-per-view, where we'll also give our predictions on the card. We will also look into what happened over on WWE as they build towards their own pay-per-view Fastlane, including the build-up to Shinsuke Nakamura's rematch for the World Heavyweight Championship, which is now set to be a last man standing match. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. We're going to start off with AEW's programming for this week, but if you would like to hear our thoughts first on what happened in WWE, please feel free to jump ahead using the time chapters in the description of the video. On that note, Thanasi, take us away with Collision.
Well, Saturday Night Collision opened up with a bit of a bang, to be honest. It's one of my top threes of this evening. It was Darby Allin taking on Christian and Luchasaurus, not in a handicap match, it's a triple threat. Darby does try to mount some comebacks during this match, so you would think that it's a handicap. He tries using coffin drop on the outside, a stunner onto Luchasaurus, but he keeps succumbing to the numbers game, and this really is the story of the match. There is a tease of dissension when Luchasaurus actually he finally touches the title belt during the match, and the ensuing fiasco between the champ and Christian leads Darby to shove them into one another to capitalize on Luchasaurus, and that includes a coffin drop. But Christian pulls him away, covers his own apprentice, and is officially the new TNT champion. He is actually going to defend it at WrestleDream in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And we do have a backstage interview as well following this match with Don Callis responding to the challenge from Kenny and Jericho from Rampage Grand Slam when Guevara said that Jericho is now dead to him. And this sets up another match. So it's going to be a 6-man Omega, Y2J, and Kota Ibushi taking on Guevara, Takeshita, and Will Ospreay. We even see one Rob Van Dam in action. He teams up with Hook, taking on Cool Hand Ange and Matt Menard, who are accompanied by Anna Jay and Jake Hager. And we're in RVD's home state of Michigan, and he's moving really well for his age. We even see him get a springboard roundhouse kick, and he's still got it, says the crowd loudly. He certainly does. He hits Rolling Thunder very smoothly for a 50-year-old. As well as his step over heel kick. And the bloke even smacks a Van Daminator on Hager. And in the finish, Hook locks in Red Rum on Ange. And then Matt Menard gets blasted away by the 5-star frog splash for RVD's pinfall victory. At WrestleDream, we also find out that Eddie Kingston is going to face Katsuyori Shibata for both the Ring of Honor World and NJPW Strong Openweight titles. Which means Shibata could end up being a triple champion if he wins, because he is the holder of the Ring of Honor Pure title. In the middle of the card, we get Julia Hart taking on, she's actually accompanied by Brody King here, taking on Kiera Hogan, and she extends her winning streak via submission. Brody even announces that the challenge has been extended at WrestleDream against Chris Statlander for the TBS title. We get a small vignette of the Righteous in the backwoods, and my reflection just briefly here is it's very similar to OG Wyatt's, right? The backwood cult kind of thing. That was the vibe that I was getting. And they're going to challenge at WrestleDream for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships. Dimitri, did you have a comment on this?
I want to add, because you touched on it, there were rumors back last year about what was being called the Wyatt Six. And I was looking into it, and apparently the Righteous were at the time considered people that might be in that Wyatt Six. So I think very much that that character they've got has, like, as you pointed out, it does have those connections. And there was at one point speculation that there was going to be some sort of collaboration.
Sorry, you broke up with me for a moment, but I think we're back on. Hopefully it doesn't make it into the recording, but if it does, just bear with us for those few seconds. You can skip 5 seconds ahead in any case. My second highlight of the night is the next match on the card, and that's Jay White with Bullet Club Gold taking on Andrade. Andrade hits a diving crossbody and a step-up drop kick, but he cannot complete the three amigos. So White drops Andrade from a fireman's carry onto the ropes and then a suplex lift onto the apron as his own kind of three amigos showboating. Andrade even smacks the fake out double moonsault where he lands on his feet and then hits a standing moonsault because the opponent actually rolls out of the way. We saw that in NXT days as well. Andrade also hits the hammerlock DDT, and Juice, he pulls the leg of Switchblade onto the rope at the very, very last second. So the luchador gets the figure four and bridges, and BC Gold, however, arranges a distraction of the referee, leading to White hitting the Blade Runner to get the victory in a very heel fashion. Next up on the card, AEW tag title match. FTR take on the Workhorsemen, and who should be on commentary but a dapperly dressed Australian Open. I was impressed by JD Springboard sent onto Dax because he's a very, very big man. Dax does. Drake even hits a moonsault. Unfortunately for him, he ends up submitting to the sharpshooter. But he really, really showcased his skill. Like, he's a massive man. He's a super heavyweight, and he really showed his stuff. AO take to the microphone, and they promise to prove how good they are. And FTR get on their knees and beg. They beg for the best contest possible. Backstage, Lexi interviews CJ Perry, and Miro actually makes an appearance here as well. They agree to each take their paths, and importantly, Miro does not consent to the promise of not laying a hand on CJ's future clients. So we should be seeing some more interaction with these two in the future. However, the main event, the third and final highlight of the night, is the Texas Death Match, Ricky Starks versus Bryan Danielson. And I should note, it's called a Texas Death Match, but it's contested under what most of us would refer to as last man standing rules. A brief recap of what happened here. Ricky hits a springboard dive onto Danielson, who was stuck on the ringside barricade. And he actually ends up hitting security staff as part of this, and assumedly planted fans. When Danielson looks for the running knee, Starks hits a sudden chair shot, then pulls out the strap from their strap match, and he also uses a steel chain to choke the veteran. Stark even looks for the spear at this point, but he runs into the label lock, and Danielson now uses the chain himself to choke his opponent. And as we reach to the close, Ricky Starks powers out. He grabs a chair, but Danielson delivers the running knee successfully. He starts stomping very viciously on Starks' head, as it just bounces between the boot and the mat. And he loops the steel chain around his knee, smacks his finisher one more time. Aubrey counts, gets to 10, and it is Bryan Danielson who is declared the winner in the Texas Deathmatch main event on Collision. That's our Collision recap for today.
Very nice and decent showing, I would say, with some good matches. We'll see where this leads into as we get into Dynamite. So let's go straight into it. This week's Dynamite obviously was the go-home show ahead of WrestleDream. It started with Rey Fenix versus Jeff Jarrett for the AEW International Championship, with Rey Fenix successfully defending his title. And this was followed by a backstage, a pre-recorded video of MJF and Adam Cole chilling together on MJF's dad's boat. And, you know, during the video, they actually caught a wild poor white while fishing. So very entertaining bit of comedy there. A bit later on what those two did on the rest of the show. After that, we had Don Callis and his family come to the ring and speak with Renee Paquette. And during that, they actually showed a video of Takeshita beating up Kota Ibushi in Japan. And the essential message they wanted to share is that they are going to win at WrestleDream. At this point, we had backstage Wheeler Yuta challenge Ricky Starks, and this was shown as a video from after Collision from Saturday. And so those two competitors are now going to battle it out at WrestleDream. Next up, we had Nick Jackson versus Brian Cage versus Claudio Castagnoli in a three-way match. And this was a number one contenders match for the AEW International Championship that Nick Jackson actually won. So that's going to be our next AEW International Championship title match, which will be next week. At this point, MJF and Adam Cole came out to the ring, and it's bad news for all us Adam Cole fans. He came out on crutches, and he said that he had injured himself last week. He's blown up his ankle essentially in 3 different places, and he's going to need surgery. Excuse me. And unfortunately, he says they need to relinquish the AEW World Tag Team Championships. But at this point, MJF interrupts him and says, no, he will defend the titles in a handicap match at WrestleDream against the Righteous. So the ever-valiant defending champion. At this point, the Kingdom came out with Roderick Strong requesting Adam's help, as he always does, and MJF, showing some personal development, actually gave Cole his blessing to go to his other friend. It was at this point that I thought, okay, that's the segment is over, but no, Jay White's music plays, and he comes out and has a promo exchange with the AEW World Champion, and it seems we now know the identity of the next number one contender for the AEW title. During the segment, MJF called Jay White Tofu, who has no taste on his own and is constantly requires other flavors to be something. And what Jay White calls MJF an unelite champion who has gone soft. So there's some tension flaring between these two, and we'll see exactly where this develops. And there actually is a little tease for this right at the end of the show that I'll get into. After this, we then saw a heated backstage interview with Jim Ross, and it had both Christian Cage and Darby Allin. So that's building up anticipation for their 2 out of 3 falls match at WrestleDream. Following that, we had the match between Orange Cassidy, Austin Gunn, Penta El Zero Miedo, and Matt Jackson. And this is a precursor for what's going to be a 4-way tag team match to decide the next number one contenders for the AEW World Tag Team titles. And Orange Cassidy pinned Matt Jackson for the win after an orange punch. Julia Hart then beat Willow Nightingale with a moonsault, and that's building up her win streak, as Thanasi, you pointed out, ahead of her title match with Chris Statlander. And the show closed with a contract signing between Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland for their bout at WrestleDream. During the contract signing, Swerve said that they are absolute opposites. Adam Page, a farmer, to Swerve Strickland, who was a mogul, a cowboy to an outlaw, a buckshot to a kill shot. Page responded with telling Swerve that he's going to get the best version of him at WrestleDream, and that he will fight to make sure he gets the victory. Swerve slapped Page, and in response, he stabbed his hand. And this was very reminiscent to me of when Undertaker stabbed Brock Lesnar's hand during a contract signing with a pen and actually signed it that way. And just as we thought the show was over, out of nowhere, we get this weird backstage clip between some hooded figures attacking the one and only Jay White behind the scenes, and who is the ringleader? Someone wearing MJF's devil mask. So there's a lot of intrigue there. We don't know what's happening, but that was what closed out our AEW Dynamite episode for this week. Thanasi, any thoughts you want to give on the show?
I have two thoughts that I just want to point out to first. One is, once again, the international title is opening up the show. It's being defended every week. Frankly, we might as well call this one the television title. Might as well give this one the TNT title name, because the TNT title is actually being treated a bit more of a standard mid-card, whereas this one's being defended on a more regular basis. And the other one that I just want to say is a very nice social commentary in the main event, where in the promo segment, in the contract signing between Swerve and Hangman regarding main event status and opportunities. because Hangman says he knocked out every opportunity he had, whether it was handed to him or earned. And it's flipped over because it said, if Swerve was receiving those kinds of opportunities, would he have been the first black AEW champion? And I think it speaks to the whole idea of equality of opportunity, right? Because we don't actually point these things out in wrestling. And the point is not to make a social comment. It's just to touch on these kinds of social issues. And I thought that was interesting. But beyond these points, look, overall, it was a bit of a dismal go-home show from Dynamite. I didn't find it very captivating personally. And I admit it's only half of the go-home because we're going to go to Collision next week. But hopefully Collision picks up the slack.
Hopefully. And before we go into our AEW WrestleDream predictions, let's quickly just touch on what happened on WWE. So, Thanasi, do you want to take us through quickly with what's been happening on SmackDown?
Let's do a SmackDown recap. So, John Cena opens the show with a promo, and the crowd starts watching him without any shame. Thank God they do so without any shame. The bloke says he wants to wrestle AJ Styles. He says he wants to wrestle, and then AJ Styles comes out, and cringeworthily he says, "You want some? Come get some," to call out the bloodline. And then Jimmy and Solo, they pull a heel fake out, however, so the match is not yet set up. And Adam Pearce is going to try to reason with Paul Heyman. Rey Mysterio and Santos Escobar face off with the Street Profits. Some of the highlights of this match: there's a Hurricane Marana from Rey who sends Tez into the middle turnbuckle, and then Santos tells Tez to suck it and hits a diving crossbody for 2. And he also delivers a standing Frankensteiner from the very, very top rope. So he literally gets onto 2 feet on the top rope and delivers a Frankensteiner there. Dawkins gets a fireman's carry flapjack and reverses the 619 into a pop-up spinebuster that he calls Sky High. And behind the ref's back, Lashley hits a chokeslam on Rey onto the apron. But when Dawkins tries to capitalize, Rey rolls him through for the 3 count. And backstage, Bobby says that he wants the watches, he wants the suits, he wants everything back if the Street Profits don't fix things. So victory there for LWO. We get a macabre promo that refers to a curse on the women's tag title scene, and it's Scottish accents. It's a tease. It's from NXT, The Witches, Isla Dawn and Alba Fire. And I love the teasing a kayfabe explanation, right? Because we keep talking about this curse on the tag titles. I really like this part, but they should be making their SmackDown debut soon. The second match on the card, Io Sky takes on Asuka for the Women's Championship. Asuka delivers the superplex and even applies a modified Kimura, Kimura/Anaconda Vice that I haven't actually seen before. Io hits a sunset flip powerbomb on the outside, and Asuka looks to hold onto the rope, but eventually does succumb. She just tries to break the pressure a little bit. Io then successfully delivers the moonsault to the outside. Asuka pushes for the Asuka lock, and Io rolls into a pin to counter it. Very intelligent work there. And we get a real tussle ensuing with Asuka trying to get the Asuka lock repeatedly, and Io writhes in and out of the lock. Bailey pulls the leg onto the rope without the ref seeing. Io to get a smack to the head on Asuka, deliver the moonsault, and retain her championship gold. It was a very good high-tension finish, especially including that very, very beautiful moonsault, the most beautiful moonsault in wrestling. The following match on the card, Brawling Brutes versus Grayson Waller and Austin Theory, A-Town Down Under. Both brutes hit the 10 beats, one on the ropes and the other on the barricade near the timekeeper's area. Grayson Waller later tries to do the same thing, but Butch uses his patented digit manipulation to break it up. Ridge even gets an old-fashioned Alabama slam and Boston Crab on Waller. However, Waller gets the rolling stunner, followed by Theory's A-Town Down, and the heels get the victory. Well done to these guys. And then the night's main event, it was supposed to be a contract signing for the tag match at Fastlane between AJ and Cena taking on Bloodline. However, before AJ can enter, we see Jimmy beating the daylights out of him backstage. Solo even gets a diving splash off of the cargo onto AJ. And in the ring, Paul cuts a promo with both members of the Bloodline. He says, Cena signed the contract, he signed the paper, but with no partner for Fastlane. And so Jimmy grabs the mic as the crowd starts chanting Rocky. Hopefully that doesn't actually end up being the case. Hopefully it's like an LA Knight thing. But Cena runs out to unload on the Bloodline, and they end up outnumbering him, and he cops the spike, cops a diving Uso splash after a "you can't see me" taunt. And this did end the show, but the ending attack was a bit prolonged. So I think they were running a little bit early for the show close and just had to make for time. Overall, this show had only 3 matches and 5 in-ring segments in all. So I think I wasn't very satisfied by this. And the comment that I want to make, and we can talk about this a little bit later as well, Dimitri, but I find WWE has a bit of I've been trying to find the words to describe it. And I'm coming up with words with either convoluted or juicy or fatty or a bit extra. And what I mean by that is the way that there's like a formula that keeps popping up on Raw and on SmackDown where they jump from in-ring entrances, a commercial break, or often there's an internal ad actually for like a WWEshop.com, and then a commercial break, a backstage segment, and then returning to the ring to commence a match. And overall, this ends up just kind of fattening up the show so that in reality, we're not getting as many segments. But I would say perhaps this was an exception because we had more segments on Raw. But perhaps, Dimitri, you'd like to tell us a bit about Monday Night Raw.
Yes, well, let's go straight into it. So, the show began with Cody Rhodes finally actually getting to talk about Jey Uso a little bit and what that means, and the implications of his trade to Raw. And he makes a reference here where he says, I don't know, but I feel like we're not in the 3rd inning anymore. So it seems like someone is teasing something with the Bloodline, and he said that he applauded Jey for not aligning with the Judgment Day, who then happened to come out, as they do. There's a skirmish between the Judgment Day and JD McDonough and the group of Cody Rhodes, Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens, the latter coming out on top in this particular skirmish.
Can I just say this, Dimitri? Yet another segment with the Judgment Day, Cody, KO, and Sami, and now Jay's in the mix. Rollins may be the World Heavyweight Champion, but these 7 guys, not JD McDonough, these 7 guys represent the Raw main event scene, in my opinion. And when I saw 4-on-4, my actual first thought was War Games, to be honest with you.
And that's what all the rumors are about. And the thing that's terrifying is that though I think we all admit we love these talents, the idea of them just doing this little dance for another 2 months before we get the payoff, I don't know, it just seems a bit excessive. And hopefully they're actually building some other things for these people to do, because I don't think anyone really wants to see them stuck in this scenario for 2 months. But I digress. Let's now get into what happened in the first match of the night, which was Bronson Reed versus Otis of the Alpha Academy. And Bronson Reed actually got the win here with his Tsunami Splash. This was followed up with Tommaso Ciampa versus Ludwig Kaiser. Tommaso Ciampa actually getting the win after a bit of distraction unintentionally caused by Giovanni Vinci at the detriment of his tag team partner, Ludwig Kaiser. And this is continuing this little dissension in the ranks and this little frustration that's happening within Imperium at the moment. We had another match in Tegan Nox versus Natalia. Becky Lynch was actually out on commentary, and she was imploring Tegan Nox to actually step up for herself, stand up, and start to fight for herself and get opportunities. And Tegan Nox actually got the win here with the world's shiniest wizard. And this, she's laid out the challenge for next week to face whoever the NXT Women's Champion is after NXT No Mercy. Backstage, Damian Priest lashed out at JD McDonough for getting involved with the Judgment Day again. And I have to say, just as a quick aside, at this moment, all I could think to myself is, God, I would not want to piss off that guy. And there's something very impressive about the rage and anger that he showed without having to use any sort of swearing or any sort of vulgar language, just with intensity in voice and facial expression. Like, you just immediately knew, yeah, you don't want to screw around with this guy. Next up, we had the World Heavyweight Champion, Seth Rollins, come out, and he laid it out on the line and told Shinsuke to either accept his challenge or he's rescinding it and giving it to another talent. Nakamura actually appeared in a pre-recorded video at this point on the Titantron, saying that he accepts the challenge and he requests a last man standing match at Fastlane. And so there's some good tension brewing here that's going to have a nice payoff. Although I have to say, and this will lead probably more into next week when we make our predictions, but Ricochet at this point was actually backstage and he said that he has unfinished business with Nakamura regardless of that match. And that's leading me to believe that Shinsuke is definitely not going to get the win that he's looking for. Next up, Dominic Mysterio wrestled Dragon Lee for the NXT North American Championship. I really enjoyed this match, a great pairing, I felt, and I think Mysterio did a really good job of trying to slow things down compared to Dragon Lee's very high action, high flying offense that's very quick. And Mysterio did get the win with the frog splash, but the crowd was really hot for this, and I think that was the thing that I got. And for most of the night, the crowd was electric. But I noticed it here as well, is that for a new talent to get such a good raw reaction is very positive moving the future. Fancy, you have some thoughts on this?
I just wanted to say one of the storytelling parts of this match that I liked was the contrast of styles, because Dom does not have he doesn't have an over-the-top kind of luchador style, right? He has a more standard North American kind of style. And like I thought it was really cool to see, Dom hitting the DDT on the apron, to hit the Michinoku driver in response to Lee, with the smooth as silk Hurricane Rana to the outside, right? I thought that was a real good storytelling there.
Yeah, and that's I think is the other thing that helped is that the fact that Mysterio, who is a Latino wrestler, but he has those influences from the more American style and a bit of the Japanese, also obviously with things like the Michinoku driver. But the idea, like, yes, you're right, of him actually just being able to slow it down and be the guy to keep it sort of in check so that those bouts of exciting, just move after move that's lightning quick, just be able to do that contrast. Following that, Michael Cole had an in-ring interview with Nia Jax. She came out and she tells him that, she's the baddest person in WWE. And she gets interrupted at this point by Zoe Stark, who essentially claimed that she was blindsided last week, but in a fair fight, she can take her. The two have a match at this point, which Jax wins with her corner move, squash, it seems, just sitting out onto Zoe Stark.
It's called the Banzai Drop. So it's an homage to also a Pacific Islander wrestler, Yokozuna. Yeah.
I knew it.
Haha.
You triggered my memory there now as you brought it up. It's like, yeah, okay, so that's obviously where she's getting it from. Let's hope that she can not, injure too many people with it and she can do it safely. Next up, we had Miz TV with Drew McIntyre. And as a comic book fan, especially of the movies and the characters, I found it really weird when Miz compared Drew McIntyre to the Batman. And he said he was the Batman of WWE, and that if he's Batman, then Cody Rhodes is Superman, which I just thought, oh my, like, wow, okay.
It's so true.
Well, it's true in some senses and not true in others, but yes. Kofi and Xavier Woods actually called out McIntyre for being so cold-blooded at this point, and they were referring to last week when he just stayed at the ramp as Jey Uso was getting pummeled by the Judgment Day. And he says, they say that that's not the Drew that they know. Drew takes issue with this criticism given the history he has with the Bloodline and this leads into a match between the Scottish Warrior and Kofi Kingston. Before we can get a proper resolution to that match, Ivar of the Viking Raiders comes out and he beats up Xavier Woods on the sidelines. And Kofi gets distracted by this, and Drew McIntyre capitalizes on it, and by landing his Claymore kick for the win. And then afterwards, he walks away and allows Ivar to beat up Kofi as well.
I think if I can just make a comment on this segment, Dimitri. Kofi on the microphone, very, very passionate. We really like to see this side. He's come so far since first debuting, and obviously we always knew how good he was as a wrestler, but this whole New Day stint of the last 10 years or so, he was so good there, and it was a real contrast to the way the Miz was replying, like, and just making jokes out of everything. So Drew had to turn around and be like, "Shut up, Miz!" Like basically every line, and I thought that was a really good showing from all these veterans.
Yes, he certainly has improved a lot more since the time they made him have a Jamaican accent.
Oh, yes.
The close of the night saw the Judgment Day in the form of Finn Balor and Damian Priest go up against Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens for the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. It was a very solid match, and they gave a lot of time to it, which I was happy to see. The finish goes a little bit like this, where Dominic provides one distraction, but is taken out by Jey Uso. JD McDonough then runs out and intervenes to help Mysterio beat down on Jey, when Cody Rhodes runs out and helps Jey overturn the numbers. Owens stunners Finn Balor, and Zayn haluva kicks Damian Priest, but McDonough smashes Zayn in the head right after he's delivered the haluva kick with one of the titles, and Priest sort of collapses and puts an arm over Zayn very groggily for the 1, 2, 3. Judgment Day retains the titles thanks to JD McDonough. So we'll see how this develops, the storyline going on between JD McDonough and especially Damian Priest. What did you think of this as a match, as a main event, and in terms of advancing the stories going on?
My attention was drawn especially by the absolute finish, right, the last shot, because basically the show closes with all the faces standing tall after a bit of a brawl, and that look, it explains what I assume was a dark match. I assume the dark match was like an 8-man tag or something, like just to finish the show. But it doesn't explain the bigger picture yet. It's not quite clear to us exactly where we're heading. If it is War Games, okay, but we've given our thoughts a bit earlier that I don't know if that's actually where they're going for it. But in any case, yeah, it was a bit of a weird way to end the show, I thought.
It wasn't as weird for me though, I'll say, because the thing is, like, yes, we're speculating about War Games, and a lot of people are speculating about that being the outcome. But the thing is, just more simplistically, the story that's being told here is JD McDonough's induction into the Judgment Day. And in terms of that story, every week there is a different element being brought in, and it's very reminiscent to me of when Sami Zayn was trying to get into the bloodline, and that he was slowly getting on the good graces of everyone else, and it was that one stick in the mud. In this case, it's Damian Priest in the blood. With Sami, it was Jey Uso, and it seems that's the point of what's going on in this storyline, is that JD McDonough's trying to get Damian Priest to be on board with him. And so from that angle, I actually think this was a good way to close the show.
I still struggle to see though that how, because JD McDonough is not a main event level superstar. Sami Zayn has been for a very long time. He was just anointed as such when he won in the WrestleMania main event, when he got the belts. But look, I see your point if that's like the underlying story going on here. But yeah, that's my view on that particular one. And if go on.
Well, I just got to say that you say he's not a main event level star. You are right, but Damian Priest wasn't before the Judgment Day, and Dominic Mysterio especially was not before the Judgment Day. So the Judgment Day has a history of elevating the talent involved in it. Even Rhea Ripley, who was successful before it, has reached new heights in the faction, and Finn Balor has arguably never had a more compelling character than he does now.
I'm not saying there's no potential for it, but the thing is currently the person you put in your main event of Raw is not the person who's going to be your main eventer in 6 months or 12 months' time. It's the person who is in your main event scene right now. And at the moment of the eight, JD McDonough is on a tier below the other seven, I would say. So making him the focus, it's not a very strong way to build a product, right? Because we're not building it around, say, a Cody or a Rollins or even a KO and Sammy, to be honest with you.
Well, there are 8 people involved there, and he's just one, but he's by no means the one that's been carrying the story. It's a side plot within the main plot. Like,
Exactly right. So the main plot there was not very in focus, right? The main plot is a little bit directionless at the moment. So that's why I thought it was a weird way to end the show that way.
I don't know, I think them retaining because of JD McDonough was the right way to go, to be honest. And look, to be honest, I'd like to see Sammy and Owens actually move on to other things outside of the tag scene eventually. So hopefully this isn't like a long-term issue thing for them.
If I can just take a moment now to just comment on the show as a whole. And I was just doing some counting here because I remember how I mentioned that there were, well, 3 matches, but five in-ring segments took place, or 5 segments took place on SmackDown. In contrast, Raw, according to my count, had 9. And here I'm counting Nia Jax's interview and her subsequent match, and then the Miz TV segment and the subsequent match as one, right? I'm counting them as one each. Raw still managed to fit in 9 segments. So WWE knows how to provide us some variety on television. So there is a bit of a balance there. But I think that was just something that I did want to draw attention to, in contrast, say, to an AEW in the style presentation, right? So the formula that I mentioned before about SmackDown, it did carry through on Raw, where you've got a superstar makes an entrance, an internal ad, probably like a weshop.com or something like that. We go to an ad break. We return with a backstage segment to the broadcast and then go to the ring for the match. And overall, this is subjective, right, on if you like that. But AEW doesn't have this same formula, right? We have an entrance, we complete the entrances, we have the match closes, and then we go to the next segment, which might be backstage, might be in ring. Sometimes they break it up with backstage between the in-ring segments. That's fine. But the thing is, they don't have that jump around between the backstage and the entrances and the match. And like I said before, the way that I've been trying to describe it is words like, on one side, the WWE approach is it's got more fat, it's got more bones, it's got a bit more filler, it's a little bit more convoluted. And some of this is good, right? Because, if you ask Al Yaya, food needs a bit of fat in order to be delicious, right? Fat is flavor. On the other side, though, the way that AEW does it, I'll describe it as it's a leaner product. You could also call it more basic, more simple, more direct, right? It's subjective. It's what kind of a product do you prefer? But it's the other side. It's like if you're going to have less fat, at least you're going to have the more protein source, right? You've got access to actual more meat to go through. And this is leaving aside if you watch the Fight stream that actually has more content, because on Fight, they don't when it's picture-in-picture time, they in America, they keep it running. There's commentary on the back. In Australia, on the broadcast, there's no picture-in-picture and there's no commentary during the picture-in-picture. But that's just a contrast of styles that I wanted to draw some attention to. Dimitri, have you ever picked up on this kind of stuff?
Well, I have, because the thing is, the WWE has a formula. They follow a formula. AEW also follow a formula, but like you said, because it's more basic, you don't feel like it's a formulaic show, with certain exceptions being that a lot of people noticed the AEW International Championship opened every Dynamite for however many weeks or whatever. So like there are certain elements, and they talk about how on Dynamite and Collision, there's like one women's wrestling segment, and they never go any deeper than that. And so like there are still elements, but the way I would put it is like this. And this is one of the concerns I have with AEW, is that a lot of the time it feels like they have matches for the sake of having matches. We want our wrestlers to wrestle because they like to wrestle and they're just going to wrestle. In WWE, they make more of an effort to show why these people are wrestling. And even when they give, and a lot of the time it's not even complex reasons. It's just as simple as, I'm backstage, I run into you, you're bad. Hey, well, don't say that. I'm going to fight you now. Yeah, okay. Like sometimes the reasons for them fighting is as simple as that. But even on television shows, they never just say, oh, he's wrestling that wrestler, and it's just going to be a spectacle for them to show it off. Like, even if it's a dream match or like a match between two talents we really like, they still try and give it their own in-story reason for why they're competing. And that, to me, is something that I do value, because I want to have a reason to support this wrestler or that wrestler I feel like in AEW sometimes they don't define that enough for me to care about which one's going to win. And it's just about just enjoy the spectacle.
Well, I think that actually goes quite precisely to the point that I was saying before, right? Because you like those explainer pieces, which someone else might refer to as filler. And that's because it's like the fat or cooking meat that's on the bone, right? Like it makes it more delicious for someone in your shoes. Someone else might disagree. It's important though that this is actually kind of a style choice. But yeah, if I just to close the loop, if I can, and then I'll go to you. Collision also had 5 segments, I think I counted. Like SmackDown, the thing is, all of those in-ring segments were matches, so I actually had more wrestling on the card. And then in contrast, Dynamite had 7 segments, I think it was, but a couple of these were promo segments. So there were, I think, likewise 5 matches or so, or 4 matches or so on the card. But yeah, Dimitri, back to you.
Well, the thing is, you call it filler and fat, and I think some of it is fat, but I think it's
Fat's not bad. Like I said, fat is flavor.
Well, the thing is, I think to me, actually giving a reason for why these people are fighting is not just as simple as fat. To me, that's integral to storytelling and the storytelling of wrestling. And I think this is where AEW sometimes takes it more lax. And I think this actually is in response to the fact that when they started, AEW wanted to be a sport. And in sport, sometimes you wrestle someone because you two are competitors and you're put together. So I think that's the response, is that because they were built on a foundation of, we try to simulate more like combat-based styles, whereas WWE, there is a bit of that like comic booky attitude of like, oh, this guy is being a dastardly bad person and I'm going to respond. Or this person has insulted, the classic, this person has insulted my honor and I'm going to take him up on it. So it's like it's like these tried and tested storytelling elements, but they really do cling on to that. At least that's my observation.
Shall we do some predictions? What do you reckon?
Let's do some predictions. So we're now going to, obviously AEW WrestleDream is this weekend, and so we're going to give our thoughts on it. Currently, there are 10 matches on the card. There may be an addition on Collision, we don't know, but for the sake of predictions at this current time, we're just going to call the 10 matches. So that's it. Let's get into it. To start off, the first match we're going to talk about is Hangman Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. Who have you got and why?
To be honest with this one, I personally think that the right call here is Swerve. We're trying to elevate someone here. Hangman, yes, he's not an absolute megastar, but he is an absolute superstar in AEW. And I think this is the time for him to do the job and help elevate a colleague. So I'm going with Swerve.
For everything you said, I 100% agree. I'm really high on Swerve Strickland. I think this guy has a lot about him that can really be a top level star in AEW.
I know it's a bit of an aside, and it's something that perhaps you and I might like to do at a future time on the channel. But one of my favorite showings of Swerve was before I knew he was called Swerve Strickland, when he was Killshot, and he made a reference to Killshot in the segment in his match against Dante Fox or AR Fox in Lucha Underground. In there, it was effectively like a 3 stages of hell match. It was absolutely brutal. But yeah, maybe one day we'll go through that on the show.
Potentially, that it's a very graphic match. I think it's fair to say, Thanasio.
Extremely, extremely.
So it's not for the light, for the weak of heart. The next match, FTR versus Aussie Open for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. Thanasio, how do you see this one playing out?
Look, I did enjoy the promo segment that Australian Open had or Aussie Open had, but I can't see them defeating FTR. I feel like this is not the platform. They're not quite there yet, and FTR's too big, so I'm gonna have to go with the old Southern boys.
I we still can't separate each other because I'm 100% on board with your prediction as well. I think FTR will retain, and I think we got to wait until it feels like it's the right moment before they drop the titles. And it doesn't feel like this is potentially the right team, but just not the right moment. That's the way I feel about it. Okay, well, to continue the tag team predictions, we've got MJF versus The Righteous. And this is going to be effectively a 2-on-1 handicap match for the ROH World Tag Team Championships. Does MJF pull it off, Thanasio?
This one is actually really hard for me to predict because even when MJF and Adam Cole were together, there was a little bit of a question mark on if they were going to win. I think they still would win. It's just a question of now, can MJF win in a handicap situation? I'm sure we can find some kind of a screwy way for Adam Cole to get involved, like hit him with the crutches or something, because he did help out with in the match against Samoa Joe at AEW Grand Slam. So I think based on that logic, I'm going to go with MJF, the big baby face, is going to prevail against The Righteous.
I'm torn on this one. I think the handicap element is what's really thrown a spanner in the works for my prediction. And for that alone, I am going to predict The Righteous to win. And I actually have enjoyed the limited amount I've seen of them. I think they have something about them. And for some, like, this is going to be such a niche reference, but their theme song reminds me a lot of a specific episode of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, when there's a cowboy villain in the show, and the theme that they've got, it always reminds me of that. But it's that like cowboy western element that they've got in the soundtrack. To me, at least, that's what it reminds me of. But I digress. The only way. The other thing I can see happening here is these followers that attacked Jay White potentially getting involved in this match to help MJF.
And that is a very good shout.
Yeah, and it could be like a weird like cult of the devil type deal that's going on there. I don't know. So, but I'm still going to predict The Righteous. I think they could take it, and it might be a good way to get the titles off of what is essentially the main event scene of AEW and just give it its own focus. But this one, I'm really torn. Like, I don't know exactly where it's going. But let's now go into the next match. And it's Chris Jericho and the Golden Elite versus the Don Callis family, which is Konosuke Takeshita, Sammy Guevara, and Will Ospreay. That's it. This one's pretty tough for me as well. I'm gonna put my cards on the table, and I'm just gonna say, for the simple fact of giving Takeshita a third win over Omega, technically, I'm gonna predict the Don Callis family here. Like, but for you, like, how do you see it? Because this one's quite tough for me.
Look, I wish I could disagree, but it just feels like the right choice is to go with the heels here. Like, all the momentum is with these guys. The momentum is with Will Ospreay. It is with Sammy Guevara. It is with Takeshita as well. And frankly, all three of the baby faces, they can cop the loss and just still keep going, right? Like, there's no harm going. It would stunt, though, the development of the heels for them to lose. Therefore, right call is a heel victory.
And look, the thing is, the heels winning, like Jericho and Omega are made men. Kota Ibushi has such a rep. I think you are right. Like, if we're talking about just keeping momentum going, the heels makes more sense. But we'll see how it goes. Speaking of made men, Christian Cage versus Darby Allin in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the AEW TNT Championship. Obviously, a guy like Christian Cage doesn't need to have a long reign to solidify his success and cement his legacy. But then I say, how do you see this going?
I'm going to throw out a weird one here. I'm going to throw out a very weird one here.
Okay.
I'm going to say it 1 fall apiece.
Yeah.
Basically clean. It's going to be 1 fall apiece. But instead of Luchasaurus coming out to make the attack and support Christian to win, I'm going to say that we might have the AEW debut of one Adam Edge Copeland as a heel, as a heel.
Oh, oh,
And that must mean, in order to get the heat, that Christian Cage is going to emerge victorious, and it's gonna be like a three-way kind of co-champion thing where Luchasaurus and Christian and Adam Copeland, Edge, are all going to be the co-champions of the TNT title belt. What do you reckon?
oh my God. I have so many thoughts on that. I look, I'm probably the one out there that is completely against the green, but I really don't want to see Edge show up in AEW. I think I'm a football fan, and I'm a big sports fan, and particularly the reason I bring that up is I love it when people stick to a team, especially when they've been there for so long. I feel like it damages the legacy that you leave behind if you just have a short stint elsewhere. And in Edge's case, like, he is a WWE guy. He's been there his entire career, and he's gone through so much. And I would hate for him to to sort of just go to AEW for even like for a couple months just for the sake of being there. Obviously, it's his decision, and I'm sure it would still be entertaining to see him there. It's just from a personal preference, I wouldn't want him to show up in AEW. And not for that reason. I didn't even think of that, but I've got Darby Allin going over in this one. I love Christian Cage, but it kind of feels like Darby Allin's been doing this underdog heroic battle to try and get the TNT Championship again, and I think this is the moment that they're gonna give it to him. But God, Thanos, you've fucked up my brain now with that.
Spatter in the works, right? Look, I'm not saying it's actually going to happen. To be honest, I don't think it's going to happen. I think all these rumors are out of this world, but it'd be fun to think about, to be honest.
And I guess you're going off but what if?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, a bit more grounded to absolute reality. We know Eddie Kingston is going up against Katsuyori Shibata in a singles match for the ROH World Championship and the NJPW Strong Openweight Championship. Is this a successful pair of title defenses for Kingston within the one match?
Look, I think so. I am actually going to go with Eddie Kingston on this one. However, I'm thinking internally of the alternative. If he were to drop both titles in one go, it could set him on a bit of a downward spiral, and give his character a bit of a new direction there, because he kind of seems now that he's defeated Claudio, like he's at the peak of a mountain.
Yeah.
And if it's a sudden drop, that's a story in and of itself, as opposed to leaving him there until it gets stale. And it would be cool to see Shibata be like a three belt man, right? That would be cool. But look, I think rationally speaking, it's not quite time yet for Eddie to lose the straps. So I am going to stick with him.
As am I. Very simple. Yeah, I think Kingston's going to defend successfully. We'll see how it plays out. Hopefully it'll be a good match. The next match we've got to predict is Chris Statlander versus Julia Hart for the AEW TBS Championship. Julia Hart's got a big win streak here, Thanos.
Yeah, like 20 plus matches, 25 plus matches or something. And that honestly does make me a bit worrisome, because you want to end winning streaks on a good platform. The thing is, a lot of she's not been in high profile matches, right? This is across all of AEW programming. And it might be a chance to feed a heel on a big run to Chris Statlander and make her even bigger. But to be quite honest, I think that is actually the way that I'm going to go. Doesn't mean that, Julia Hart is going to get knocked down a peg. But I think Chris Statlander is a really credible mid-card champion, and I'm just going to back her.
You know what? Screw it. Julia Hart's going to win it. It's not where my head's at. It might not even be where my heart's at. But you know what? Sometimes you ride with the momentum, and I think it's hard to argue, not just in the sense of the win streak, but Julia Hart has completely revolutionized her own identity as a wrestler since joining the House of Black. I think she's become a very synonymous figure with the faction, and the pairing of her with Brody King, I think, is really working well.
If she does win it, there's a part of me that would like to see the all the belts situation where, give her the TBS title, get either like the Ring of Honor or the AEW tag straps on Buddy and Brody King, and then get a singles title on Malachi Black. I would like to see that. And it'd be a cool parallel, right, with Judgment Day actually having the same thing, right? Because they've both kind of got that dark kind of macabre gimmick.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of cool for me.
Could be. We'll see how that plays out. But let's now go into the next match, which is the Young Bucks versus the Guns versus the Lucha Brothers versus Orange Cassidy and Hook. So it's 3 brother tag teams versus Orange Cassidy and Hook in what is a 4-way tag team match for a future AEW World Tag Team Championship opportunity. This, obviously, with 4 different teams, it's really hard to predict how this one's going to play out. I don't know. How do you see it? Like, where do you see this going?
Perhaps this just kind of, shows you a bit about my personality, but I think about it with the process of elimination. And I think the Young Bucks recently won the 6-man World Tag, Ring of Honor World Tag Championships with Hangman. So I don't think they're quite due. And also Nick Jackson, for some reason, is the #1 contender for the international title. So I'm removing them from the equation. Orange Cassidy, I would have actually thought that he and Hook might get it. But the thing is, because he won the Fatal 4-way, I knocked them out of it as well. And I think it's the Lucha Brothers and the Guns, right? And I think there's a lot more flavor to be had because the Guns are heels and FTR are baby faces, to put them with each other. So by that logic, I'm actually going to go with the Guns on this one. I don't think it's going to be clean. I think it's going to be some kind of dirty fiasco shenanigans, but I'm going to go with the Guns.
And the thing is, I feel like story-wise, that one makes the most sense based on what we've got at our disposal. The only issue I have with it is that I would like to see FTR face different opponents, because this is obviously, we're basing this on the idea they're going to face FTR and not Aussie Open. But yeah, so because they've already faced the Guns, I'm gonna predict the team of Rey Fenix and Penta to win it. I'm not confident on this one, but they're a team I don't think they've faced in this reign, so that's why I'm giving it to them. But I think, with the exception of Orange Cassidy and Hook, FTR have faced these tag teams before, so it's not like there's a new opportunity with the other 3. But yeah, so I'm going with the Lucha Brothers.
It's a good piece of logic that you've used, because the AEW does try to avoid repeat matches. They try to just keep things fresh as much as possible. So it's a good thought process.
I think we've both had good thought processes, and it's just a matter of which direction they go. All right. The penultimate match we're going to talk about is Ricky Starks versus Wheeler Yuta. For me, this is very simple. Ricky Starks gets the win, surely, right?
What else could it possibly be, right? He's on a great run. Just give him the win. Don't do anything stupid, as Captain Jack Sparrow would say.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there's nothing else to add on it, but hopefully, absolute Ricky Starks does get that pay-per-view win in this case to sort of build on his momentum. And this now leads us into what I think is going to be the main event, and it's certainly the most anticipated match of this card, and that is Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. Thanasi, this has been a match years in the making for all wrestling fans, and I'm certain that it's been a match years in the making for Tony Khan. Firstly, the question I have is not even just who wins, but will this match live up to the hype?
See, that's actually a much better question than who will win, because frankly, anyone who asks the question who's going to win, and I know that we're posing it to each other here, but frankly, it's who cares, right? Like the fact that we're getting this match is big in and of itself. I don't actually care who the winner is. Um, will it live up to the expectations? I have to believe that it will. I believe this is the right platform. It was the first match announced on the card, which means I've had a long time to plan for it. And it's paying homage to a great technician. It's going to be technical wrestling in Antonio Inoki. So if it doesn't live up to it, it's going to be a massive disappointment. But I think both of the guys are going to show up. As for predicting a winner, frankly, it's a flip of a coin. Let's go with Zack Sabre Jr.
Yeah, the optimist in me is saying this match will live up to it. This is just one of those things where I've been long anticipating it. And essentially, for me, the hype has been built up because of what I've heard. I'm not a Zack Sabre Jr. specialist or avid fan. I've watched Bryan Danielson for many years in his work with AEW and then in WWE as Daniel Bryan. So I know how good and fantastic of a wrestler, actually not just good, phenomenal he is. So I have to believe that it's going to be great. And look, I'm going to give it to the American Dragon. I think he will win it, and it'll be a moment, and I reckon afterwards there'll be a shake of the hands, and they'll show some respect, and they'll move on from that. But I think that is as long as that lives up to it, I think everyone will be happy with the pay-per-view, to be honest. But okay, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we're obviously going to give our thoughts on AEW WrestleDream, as well as look ahead to WWE's Fastlane event. So be sure to tune in. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Great to be around.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.